Okay, now that we have our pump properly set up, it's time to prime it. And we're going to start by turning on the pump, the Quest, and the CDI. The power buttons to turn these machines on are on the pump, down below here, just to the right of the lower left wheel. I'm going to turn that on. On the Quest, the switch is right here. And then coming around to the back of the CDI, right here. Okay, we're at the back side of the pump here. I've grabbed the calibration equipment for the CDI. I like to just hang it on the IV poles here. And I've also grabbed the CDI sensor. So we're going to take note of this number here. This one happens to be 938B, and we're going to remember that number for the CDI. So we're going to open this packaging, remove the sensor, and this is what it looks like. We're going to slightly open this this blue cap just so that it's loosened a little bit, and we're going to remove this blue cap from the bottom. We're going to remove the CDI attachment here, uncoil some cord, and push the sensor into this. I like to do it by pushing in the center. You'll hear it kind of click into place. Just make sure it's fully seated. The blue cap goes up, and now this gets seated into the back of the calibration equipment here. This black cable comes off the top. There is a red dot on it. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a red dot, and that orients to the left on the back of the CDI under this serial cable here. So this is the screen that you get on the CDI after it does its initial boot up. You want to choose, it's going to be the first thing that comes up, but it'll say arterial blood gases and hematocrit. You're going to hit the green check to open that. Arrow left to go to calibration, and push the green arrow again. And now here is where we're going to pick the sensor. These things are set up from the factory so that they will calibrate correctly with the correct number here. So we need to, ours was 938B, so we need to push the plus button on the left here until we get to 938. And if we needed to change the letter, we would do that as well, but that's correct, and we hit the green button there. Now if we have everything already connected, as we do, then we just hit the green button again. And now this will take about 10 minutes, so you want to do this first. Here's the welcome screen on the pump. You want to choose perfusion, and then usually the first option that comes up on there, choose to open that. And this will start up the pump here. And now we're going to start priming the pump. I forgot to mention this during the backup setup, but you want to restock anything that you have used. You will always be using Plasmalyte, so make sure to restock that fully. Any hemoconcentrator that you use or any other piece of equipment that you use, make sure to restock that. So we're going to open 2 of these bags and hang them. And we're going to grab our fill lines here, and we're going to spike these bags. We're now going to put our arterial pump head into the roller just by rotating this and then adjusting if needed to get it seated correctly in the raceway. And we're going to drop our fluid. And I apologize, I'm going to go a little bit faster because I'm actually kind of running out of time, even though I came in an hour early. but we're going to drop approximately 1,300 milliliters. Okay, while that fluid is dropping, we can come over to the Quest and we can get this started. So this is the screen you get. You hit New Case Setup, System Pressure. Now we're going to play whack-a-mole with all these buttons that light up. So just press each of these buttons as they light up. These are all different settings, but they're already pre-programmed, so you're just basically confirming those. Now you'll get to the point where it says Start Prime, and we're going to leave it there for a minute. Okay, at this point we've dropped our fluid, and now we need to start priming the pump. First thing we need to do is set the occlusion on the arterial pump head. And the best way I found to do this is to close all the purges. So we have our manifold here. We're going to rotate that stopcock to the right to close that. We are going to make sure that our recirculation connection here, this Duraclamp, is closed. And the oxygenator purge, I don't know if you can see that, but the oxygenator purge line has a Duraclamp. I'm going to close that. So all those purges are closed. And make sure that the connections on your pre-bypass filter are pushed down a little bit so that once you start flowing through here, that doesn't open up. It doesn't have to be super crazy, but make sure it's not about to fall off basically. Press the button on the pump here to start it, and now we're going to crank this up to maybe 1.5 liters or so, and we're going to watch the arterial line. I don't know if you can see this, but okay, now I have flow coming up that arterial line. And I want to stop the pump at its most occlusive setting with fluid coming up that line. So I'm going to give this one more turn here. You want this as high up on the line as you can get it. I'm sure you're probably aware by now, but you want this, in reality, you want this to be 30 inches above the raceway, and you want to set the occlusion so that you get a 1 centimeter drop per minute, which, as you can see here, this is much faster than that. So to adjust this occlusion, come over to the pump here, and to tighten it, which is what we need to do, we are going to rotate this counterclockwise. Which seems kind of counterintuitive, but that's the way it needs to go. I'm going to actually give this one more turn to bring it up a little bit. And if you go too far, you can open up any one of your purges, such as on the manifold here. You can just open this up, and as long as you haven't gone way far into the tubing inside the basket, it will bring that back down. So you can see where we're at here. Still getting more of a drop than I'd like. I'm going to occlude that a little bit more, and we're going to adjust this until we get that proper occlusion. That looks good. Once that's set, we're going to open the pump up to 4 liters a minute, something like that. I'm going to try to get some air out of this line here. You can kind of smack on this all day and you're going to get air out of this pre-bypass filter, but just kind of get the majority of the air out of there. And now I'm going to go to the back, open up the recirc line, open up the oxygenator purge, and open up my manifold here to let those prime up. Then I'm going to come back over to the Quest. Alright, back over at the Quest here, I'm simply going to hit Start Prime, and that will start it doing its thing. Okay, I'm over at the vent and sucker heads here, and we're going to put these lines into the raceway. Grab a clamp, occlude the inflow, turn on the pump, crank it up. This one's already good, but we're going to tighten this until we start to see that line collapsing on itself, and then we're going to slow this down to a crawl just to keep the line from kinking off. Now we're going to do the same thing with the suckers. This is typically a little bit more difficult, but it works the exact same way. One tip, if you're getting a pump jam, is to loosen it up, crank the thing up, to like a liter a minute, and then start dialing it in. You'll find that works much better. Okay, now if you do what I've done here, which is not put the drugs in the Quest before you've primed it, you will get these alarms here that the arrest and then the additive are empty. Just simply hit disable on both of those when they come up. Now I'm going to prime up the pressure monitoring for the arterial line. We're going to remove this from the gauge here. Make sure that we're hanging this upside down and that the stopcock is open all the way around. You'll see fluid draining in there if you have the pump set high enough and the pressure is good. Once this bulb is filled as far as it will go, you're going to rotate this to the up position so that it's open between the syringe and the bulb. And you're going to pull back on the syringe to pull out any air, and then rotate the stopcock to a 45 to close it to everything. You're going to take off the syringe. That's going to go on your manifold for venous draws later on. Now you're going to connect this back to the pressure gauge. Sorry, this is all kind of off camera for me. Back to the pressure gauge. This time you're going to seat it fully. And you're going to take your arterial line, which has just been left hanging here, and attach it to this open side here on the stopcock. Now you can do this any number of different ways here, but up on the pressure transducer you'll see that this is open. Down here we're going to open this line until we just see fluid coming out of the top of that stopcock. Then we're going to close that off. So you probably can't see it, but there's just a tiny bubble of fluid up here on the transducer. We're going to come over to the pump here, hit cal on the arterial, 0. Then while we're here we can go venous right away and 0 that as well. Close that out, you'll see this read 0. Now back over here at the transducer, we can close this, close off the venous, and now we can open this stopcock up to all 3 ways. Now you'll see we have a pressure reading on the monitor. I'm going to put my level sensors on the reservoir. You should put these, at least in the beginning, wherever your perfusionist wants them to be at. Some of them actually may not want you to even put them on there. They might want to do this part themselves. But make sure that you do not hang the level sensors off of there until they've been sticking on the reservoir for a few minutes. Otherwise they can fall off. Okay, I'm running out of time, as I said, so I'm going to try to cover I might not be able to cover everything, and try to cover some stuff that's a little bit more difficult for people. I'm going to remove this pre-bypass filter now. You want to let this run through the pump for, I don't know, half an hour if you can. That's not always possible, but if you can, let it flow through there for a while. I've slowed the pump down to about 3 liters a minute, and I'm going to open my recirculation line. That's very important because I'm going to occlude this arterial line. If that wasn't open, I would massively overpressurize the system. So open up that recirculation line. You're going to need 2 clamps. Take one clamp above the pre-bypass filter first. Do that first. And then at the lower connection, right above or right below the pre-bypass filter. You're going to remove the bottom section. Kind of leave that tail in there for a second. Remove the top section. Now reconnect these. And this is the section of filter you're left with. You're going to go dump this out in the sink and make sure you don't leave it there. Okay, after you've disposed of that, you're going to come back, carefully remove this clamp, and you're going to fully seat this connection now all the way on, and this is where that zip tie comes in handy. That is kind of a wet connection, so I like to put a zip tie on here. It's not necessary, but it'll give you a bit of peace of mind. It's pretty low pressure, it's the venous side, but you know, and then just kind of remove any air from that. Okay, I'm back over here at the Quest. In the interest of time, I've drawn up these drugs, but we have our potassium, our adenosine and mag sulfate, and our substrate solutions. If you did not put these drugs in first, which you will during your priming exam, you won't have to do this part, but you'll hit end recirc here. Double, always choose double even if you don't have retrograde. Confirm for the 2 milli equivalents. We're going to put the potassium on the yellow side. We're going to hit arrest agent. Open up this yellow stopcock here. Push this all the way in. Pull back on the syringe to remove any air. Close that yellow stopcock back up and hit enable. It'll do its thing here for a minute while it primes that. Okay, now we're going to do a similar thing with our substrate and mag sulfate. So we're going to attach those to this. There's a secondary stopcock on here. We're going to put those on. And we're going to push 15 milliliters of the mag sulfate into the substrate syringe. Move this stopcock to this position so it's open to these two, and push 15 mils into the substrate solution. After we've done that, now we're going to push 30 mils of this substrate solution into the Quest. We're going to hit additive. Open up that green stopcock, making sure that it's open to the substrates on the secondary stopcock. And on the back, go till roughly 30, pull back the air. There should be roughly 30 left in there. Close that green stopcock again and hit enable. And once again, that'll do its priming thing. Now, one thing we're going to want to do here is we want to pressurize this system. Without doing this, the pressure on the monitor is going to be low. After we've removed the pre-bypass filter, we're going to partially occlude the venous return here by putting a clamp on part way. And you'll see once we do that, that we will pressurize the system. After we've pressurized the system, we're going to start recircing on the Quest. And one thing you can do, if you hear the heater running on this thing, hit H2O circ and turn that off. Then hit prime, start recirc, and then crank this up to around 500 or so. You may get some air in the system. If you do that, reach back here and push down on the antegrade and retrograde plungers for these clamps. If you get a maintained flow rate, such as I'm getting here, you need to increase the pressure in the system, either by increasing your pump flow or occluding that venous return line more. After the CDI is done calibrating, we can remove this and take out all the line. Now on this CDI sensor here, we want to close that blue cap back up. We want to remove the white cap from the top and the filter from the bottom. Now we're going to put that in its holder. Snake it under the vent and sucker lines and push it onto its holder here. Here we go. Now to set this up, we need to occlude this line because there's no Dura clamp on here. So we actually need to clamp this with a regular clamp, and the inflow from this is at the manifold, so we want to shut off, I don't think you'll be able to see this, but shut off the far left from the back, right from the front stopcock. Now we can take our line here and disconnect it right here. If you were to disconnect this without closing either one of those things, you would get flow out of this. So we're going to take this side, connect it to the bottom, and I'm going to sort of unwrap this here, being careful to keep this sterile. And attach it to the top. Now we can open up both of those. Excuse me, no we cannot, I apologize. You need to have the sodium bicarbonate into the pump before you flow through this, otherwise it's too acidotic and will ruin this sensor. Okay, I just grabbed a 60cc syringe, remove the top. It's going to go on top of this stopcock here. And you will need, for prime drugs, you will need two 25% mannitols. So this is 12.5 grams each for a total of 25 grams. 1 amp or 50 milli equivalents of sodium bicarbonate. And 25% albumin. This is 12.5 grams of albumin. So we're going to put those into the pump. The albumin, if it's still in this bag, you can just spike and drop it that way. The mannitol and the sodium bicarbonate, you can either draw up in a syringe or you can put them in through this syringe here, which is what I'm going to do. So to give you guys an example here, here's a mannitol. Pop the cap off of that. Take a clamp, put it on the side, and you can lever that aluminum portion off the top. Sometimes the septum stays in, sometimes it doesn't, and then drop that in. I like to put the mannitol in first because it crystallizes, and putting the bicarb in second helps to wash that through. And we're going to put in the bicarb, open up the box, remove the two caps, screw that connection together, open this top cap here. You can slide this off the bottom then, and then pour that in. Now once that has recirculated for a minute with the sodium bicarbonate in there, then you can open that CDI line and start flowing through that. Okay, from up top we should have one empty Plasmalyte bag. Can't see it, it's not in frame right now, but I'm going to take that off of its hanger. So this is the empty bag. We're going to clamp that off. Take that extra hanging line over here off the venous return, and we're going to move this bag over to that. Remove this cap. Keep it sterile. Move that bag over. Put that cap back on. Now we're going to, this goes in any number of different places. Some people hang it off of the side of the reservoir here. Some people drape it in different positions, but whatever position it is, make sure that this line is open. And normally you would do this before you put the drugs in, but now I'm kind of in a hurry. And you want to get this to about 200 mils in the reservoir. And this will only work if you have this clamp on here, partially occluding. Now you open up this line, and you'll start to see the reservoir volume drop. Get that down to about 200 milliliters in the reservoir. And then close that back up. On the pump, make sure you have your bubble detector turned on, and hit the system down here to turn the audio volume down to low by tapping that twice. It just prevents the alarms from being crazy loud. One thing you will need if you have retrograde is you will need a 30cc syringe filled with fluid. You can either spike, you can either put a needle on the syringe and draw it up from the bag, or you can take it off the manifold here. And normally you do this before you have drugs in, obviously. But then this will go on the top. Let's see if this is in frame here. This will attach to the top of the retrograde pressure transducer, and you'll use that to flush the retrograde pressure line. From the back of the CDI here, we're going to remove the venous sat and hematocrit sensor, and we are going to snake it through these lines here, and we're going to attach that to the venous line here. Just clips on. To attach our level sensors, we'll need our level sensor gel. You just kind of want to dab this on each sensor. The yellow one goes on your higher level alarm, and the red one goes on the lower alarm. Okay, after your cardioplegia has been recirculating for a while, you will turn the flow rate to 0, hit end recirc. Now, if you're using the standard cardioplegia, not the Del Nido, you're going to adjust these different values now. If you had the drugs in there before you prime the cardioplegia system, these numbers may or may not already be in there. But if you are with the majority of surgeons, if you're with Werner, Kress, Crouch, O'Hare possibly, he may still be using Del Nido, he's kind of trialing it right now, and Downey, then you will turn the additive to 44, because this is with substrates. You'll set the temp to warm. You'll set the high arrest dose to 24 and the low arrest dose to 7. And I should have explained what I was doing there, but to set these, you press the button, then you can adjust it as needed, and then to set it again, then you hit the button again. If you need to switch between these, like say you're at the high arrest, you need to switch to low, you hit the button, hit to switch to low, and then hit it again. Then you will hit the hold volume button. And what that will do is, initially you'll need to flush these cardioplegia lines to the table. That is not actually being delivered to the patient. It's just basically to de-air the lines. So you don't want that recorded in the Quest as cardioplegia delivered to the patient. So you hit hold volume, and then when it's actually time to give cardioplegia to the patient, you'll remove that. When you leave the room here, you're going to have to unplug the pump, and when you turn this back on, there'll be a button that says resume. You'll hit resume, but this hold volume, all these numbers will stay in, but the hold volume will not. So you'll have to remember to turn that hold volume back on.